The night my daughter told me to leave her house, I walked into the world with nothing but my hands. And yet somehow those same hands built something she would one day come back to. You know, people don't usually think the worst pain will come from the people they love the most. Strangers can break your bones, life can break your back, but when it's your own blood, your own child, that's when it cuts the deepest. I remember the day my daughter told me to leave her house. I can still see the light on the curtains that morning, how it danced like everything in the world was fine. Except inside my chest, something was shattering. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't curse at me. No, she just said it plain, the way you'd say, the rain was falling outside. Ma, she said, I think it's time you find your own place. It's getting too hard for me and the kids. At first, I thought I misheard. I just stood there, spoon in my hand, stirring the pot on the stove. The steam rose up in my face, but I felt cold. My ears buzzed like 100 bees were trapped inside them. I said, what do you mean, find my own place? This is home. I've been here since, and I stopped myself, since her father passed, since the bills started piling, since life got harder than I thought I could bear. She looked away. She couldn't hold my eyes. She fiddled with the dish towel in her hands and said, Ma, you know I love you. But the truth is, it's too much. We don't have enough space. The kids need their rooms. And now she swallowed hard, and I need my life back. That last part, the last part burned me worse than any fire. I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind her how I carried her on my back when she was too tired to walk to school, how I stayed up sewing dresses so she could look like the other girls at church, how I starved myself some nights so she wouldn't know the cupboards were empty. But the words stuck in my throat because when your child looks at you with that final kind of decision, you know there's no fighting it. So I nodded, just nodded. That night I packed my things, not much, just a couple of dresses, some sweaters, and the old photo album I couldn't bear to leave behind. Every page smelled faintly of dust and time, and I knew if I lost that, I'd lose the proof that I had once been more than a burden. I folded my clothes slowly, hoping maybe, just maybe, she would come into the room, sit beside me, and say, I didn't mean it, Ma. You can stay. But she didn't. Instead, I heard her laughing with the kids in the living room, their voices rising like the walls themselves were choosing sides. When I stepped out with my bag, my grandson looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, Grandma, where you going? I forced a smile. Just out for a while, baby. He nodded and went back to his toys. Children don't know the weight of a goodbye. I kissed them both on the head. My daughter stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes like nothing was happening. I wanted to hug her, to make her hold me tight, and remember, I was her mother. But she just said, without turning around, lock the door behind you, Ma. And that was that. You ever notice how quiet the street feels when you step out with nowhere to go? The air hits different. The sidewalk feels like it's not yours anymore. I walked, back heavy on my shoulder, heart heavier in my chest. Every block stretched like a mile. I thought of my husband, God rest his soul. He used to tell me, you're stronger than you think, woman. And maybe he was right. But that night I didn't feel strong. I felt thrown away, like yesterday's paper. I found myself sitting on a bench outside the bus station, watching people come and go. Young men with ambition in their steps, women in neat uniforms hurrying to night shifts, travelers with their suitcases rolling behind them like loyal dogs, and me with my one bag, no ticket, no destination. I stayed there a long while, long enough for the night air to turn sharp. and my bones to ache. I thought about going back, knocking on that door, falling to my knees and begging. But pride is a stubborn thing, and hurt seals your lips tighter than glue. So I sat and I cried, quiet because I didn't want the world to hear me breaking. The truth is, I wasn't just losing a roof. I was losing the last place I thought I belonged. See, when you're a mother, you spend your whole life giving your body, your time, your dreams, your food, your sleep, your last coin. And you do it gladly because you believe the child will carry your love with them forever. But sometimes they don't. And when they tell you to leave, it feels like the world is saying, your usefulness is finished. You can go now. That's a pain no doctor can heal. I won't lie to you. I thought about giving up right there, just letting the world swallow me. But then, in the middle of my tears, I remembered something. When I was a little girl, my own mother told me, life don't care if you're tired, baby. You either get her up or you get left behind. And that night, with the cold creeping into my bones, I knew I had to get up. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know how I'd eat the next day. But I stood, brushed off my skirt, and started walking. That was the beginning of everything. The beginning of my fall and the beginning of my rise. Her voice softens, pausing as though she's catching her breath, then steadies with quiet resolve. So that's how I lost my house, my daughter's house, my home. And if you stay with me, I'll tell you how I built something greater, brick by brick, tear by tear, until the day she came back to me. The first night on the street, it's something you never forget. Not because it's dramatic like in the movies. No, because of the silence, because of how the world keeps moving like you're invisible. I walked until my legs ached, past shuttered stores, past flickering street lights, past people hurrying home to warm meals and waiting arms. My home was behind me, locked, and I had no key anymore. I ended up near the church downtown. Big stone steps, wide enough to lie down if you curled your body just right. The kind of place the city forgets after dark. I sat there, bag clutched to my chest like it could shield me from the night. And then the rain came. First a drizzle, light, almost playful, then heavy, pounding, merciless. I pulled my sweater over my head, but it soaked through fast. My bones felt like they were turning to ice. I thought, is this how it begins? One night of rain, one night of no bed, and a body can catch sickness and never recover. I tucked myself tighter against the stone wall, whispering prayers. Lord, just let me see the morning, just the morning. You don't really sleep your first night out there. Your eyes stay half open. Every sound is a warning. Footsteps echoing too close. A car slowing down, its headlights sweeping over you. The sound of glass breaking somewhere down the street. Fear has a taste, bitter, like rust in your mouth. And then when exhaustion finally drags you under, dreams come, but not soft ones. Dreams of faces you've lost, doors closing, voices fading. And when you wake, the pain hits all over again, fresh as the first time. By the second night, I found a little shelter. Not a real shelter, not yet. Just an awning behind a laundromat that smelled of detergent and heat. The machines inside hummed all night, and that sound, strange as it was, kept me company. But hunger, oh, hunger is its own kind of storm. I hadn't eaten since I left the house. Pride is a stubborn thing. I couldn't bring myself to dig in. Trash bins, not yet. I just drank water from a fountain and told myself I wasn't really hungry. That lie only works for so long. By the third night, I caved. I saw a half-eaten sandwich in the bin outside a deli, still wrapped in paper, clean enough. My hand shook as I reached for it, eyes darting left and right like I was committing some great crime. And maybe I was, not against the law, but against the version of myself I used to be. Because once you've raised a child, once you've worked and cooked and cleaned and carried yourself with dignity, lowering your hand into a trash can feels like the final proof that life has stripped you bare. I ate it, every bite, tears rolling down my face, mixing with the crumbs, and I promised myself it would not be the end of me. But promises are easy, nights are long. I met others too, people like me, wandering, invisible, a woman with tangled hair who carried her whole world in a plastic bag. A man who muttered to himself, eyes darting like flies. We shared nods, sometimes silence, sometimes stories. We were strangers, but the street makes you kin in its own cruel way. One night, under the laundromat awning, that woman sat beside me. She handed me half of her muffin, said nothing, just gave it, and I cried again, because sometimes kindness feels heavier than cruelty. There was a storm, an actual storm, on my sixth night out. The wind howled like it was tearing through my very soul. Rain slammed against the pavement, cold needles piercing skin. I pressed my back against the wall, bag clutched tight, water seeping through everything. I thought of my daughter then, warm in her bed, children tucked beside her. I wondered if she thought of me at all, if guilt ever stirred her sleep, or if she had already sealed the chapter closed and moved on. Lightning split the sky, thunder followed close, and in that roar I screamed her name, screamed it into the storm like maybe the wind could carry it back to her ears. But storms don't carry mercy. They only test what's left of you. And by morning, I wasn't the same woman who had stepped out of her house a week earlier. Something had broken in me, yes, but something else had lit too. A spark, faint, but there. Because if I could survive the street, the hunger, the storm, then maybe, just maybe, I could survive anything. Her voice steadies now, calmer, reflective. That was the first lesson the street taught me. When you have nothing, you learn what it means to still hold on. And holding on was the only thing that kept me alive. She was a big woman, round in the way that makes you feel safe, like she could hug all your broken pieces together. She wore a bright hat with a feather that bobbed when she walked. After service, she came straight to me, put her hand on my shoulder, and said, "Baby, you staying for lunch?" I shook my head quick. "No, ma'am. I'm just passing through." She looked me up and down with eyes that didn't miss a thing. Then she pressed a foil wrapped plate into my hands. "Well, you take this with you. Ain't no soul supposed to walk away hungry from God's house." I wanted to cry, not just for the food, but for the way she said it, like it was simple truth, like I still deserved to be fed. From that day, whenever I slipped into the back pew, Miss Darlene would find me after, sometimes with food, sometimes with a scarf, sometimes just with a hug. One Sunday, she said, "Where you sleeping, baby?" I hesitated. Shame pressed heavy on my chest, but something in her eyes made me trust her. I whispered, "Nowhere." She nodded, slow. Mm, well, nowhere ain't no place for God's child. That was the night she led me to the women's shelter on 12th Street. The shelter, it wasn't paradise. Don't get me wrong. Cots lined up close, snoring all around. The air heavy with sweat and despair. Fights sometimes. Theft too. You had to keep your bag close, your shoes tied to your wrists if you wanted to wake up with them still on your feet. But it was a roof. It was warmth. It was a step up from the storm. And more than that, it was people, women with stories just as broken as mine. A mother who had fled an angry husband. A young girl, barely 18, belly swollen with child. An old lady with eyes so tired she hardly spoke, but she always shared her bread. We were different but the same, each of us carrying scars the world didn't want to see. And slowly, slowly, I realized I wasn't alone. Kindness. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase the pain of being told to leave your own daughter's house, but it plants a seed. And in those days, kindness was the only seed I had. Her voice lingers, warm but heavy, like she's speaking directly into the listener's ear now. I tell you this because sometimes when you think the world has turned its back on you, that's when a stranger will hand you a coffee or a piece of chicken or a place to lay your head. And those small mercies, they can carry you through the darkest night. They carried me. When you're out there, when you've lost your place in the world, every stranger looks like a question mark. Will this one hurt me? Will this one pass me by? Or will this one show me a kindness I don't deserve? I didn't expect kindness, not after that first week. I had convinced myself the world was a cruel place, one where everyone was too busy with their own troubles to even notice me. But the thing about people is sometimes they surprise you. The first time it was the girl at the coffee shop. I used to sit outside that shop in the mornings just to smell the beans roasting. That smell, it gave me a kind of comfort, reminded me of home, a morning when I'd brew a pot before waking my daughter for school. The girl behind the counter noticed me one day. I must have looked pitiful, hunched on the bench, hair damp from the night's rain. She came out with a paper cup. Here, she said, it's just black, no sugar, no cream, but it's hot. I took it, hands trembling, the warmth seeping into my bones. I whispered, thank you. She smiled, quick and shy, and hurried back inside before her manager saw. That cup of coffee, it wasn't just coffee. It was proof that I was still visible, that someone, even for a moment, saw me as a person, not just a shadow on the street. And then there was the old man at the bus stop. I had been sitting there, waiting for nothing, because when you're homeless, sometimes you just sit where others sit so you don't look so out of place. He lowered himself onto the bench beside me, his knees cracking like firewood. He carried a paper bag that smelled of fried chicken. After a while, he pulled out a drumstick, ate it slow, then glanced at me. You hungry, ma'am? He asked. I opened my mouth to lie, to say no, pride again. But the growl in my stomach betrayed me. He chuckled soft. Ain't no shame in it. And he handed me a thigh, wrapped in greasy napkin. I ate like I hadn't seen food in days, which was the truth. He didn't stare, didn't make me feel small, just sat there, chewing his piece, like we were old friends sharing a meal. Before he left, he said, storm don't last forever. You hear me? I nodded. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but his words stuck. And then there was Miss Darlene. Ah, Miss Darlene. That woman changed everything. I met her on a Sunday morning. I had wandered into the back of a church, drawn by the sound of singing. I sat in the very last pew, trying not to be noticed. My clothes were wrinkled, my hair wild, my smell. Well, let's just say I hadn't had the chance to wash in a while. But Miss Darlene noticed me. Kindness kept me alive, but it wasn't enough to keep me living. You see, a plate of food fills your belly. A cot gives you sleep for a night. But a woman like me, I needed more. I needed to feel useful again. And for me, that meant working with my hands. At the shelter, they had a board near the door, a wooden board, old and cracked, with scraps of paper pinned to it. Jobs, they called it. But not the kind of jobs people brag about. No, these were the ones nobody else wanted. Need someone to clean out garage, help with moving boxes, dishwasher, 3 hours, yard work, small things, one day, one task, a few dollars if you were lucky. I stood in front of that board for a long time. My pride wrestled with my hunger, my exhaustion. In my younger years, I had held steady jobs: cashier at the market, seamstress in the little tailor shop. I wasn't a stranger to hard work. But now, with wrinkled hands and tired bones, I wondered if anyone would even take me still. I tore down a slip. House cleaning. Called Mrs. Peters. I'll never forget that first job. Mrs. Peters lived in a two-story house not too far from downtown, the kind of house with a neat white fence and flowers lined up like little soldiers. When I knocked on the door, I felt small. My shoes were worn, my dress faded. She opened the door, looked me up and down, and for a second I thought she'd turn me away. But instead she said, "You any good with scrubbing?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. My voice didn't even tremble, though my heart did. She handed me a bucket, pointed to the kitchen, and that was that. I scrubbed her floors till my knees ached, polished her counters till they shined like glass, and dusted every corner. Sweat rolled down my back. My arms shook. But I didn't stop, because with every stroke of that rag, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: purpose. When I was done, Mrs. Peters gave me $20. 20. It might as well have been 200. "Not bad," she said. "You come back next week if you want." And just like that, I had my first thread of dignity stitched back together. After that, I picked up whatever I could. One day, it was helping an old man weed his garden. Another day, washing dishes in the back of a diner, hands in scalding water till my skin wrinkled more than it already was. Sometimes it was babysitting for a woman who needed to work a late shift. The little boy would curl up in my lap, his hair smelling of soap, and I'd rock him till he fell asleep. Those nights, I felt closest to the grandmother I used to be. It wasn't much money, pennies compared to what the world spends, but to me, it was survival I earned. And that made all the difference. But let me tell you, the hardest part wasn't the work. No, the hardest part was swallowing the way some people looked at me. I'd show up at their door, rag in hand, and see the flicker in their eyes: pity, suspicion, sometimes even disgust, like the woman who whispered to her husband, thinking I couldn't hear, "She must have messed her life up bad to end up like this." Those words, they burned hotter than any stove. I wanted to shout back, "No, I didn't waste my life. I raised a daughter. I gave everything I had." But instead, I scrubbed her bathroom tiles till they sparkled. And I left with my $20, head held high, even if my heart was low. Because sometimes dignity isn't what people give you, it's what you refuse to let them take. At the shelter, the other women began to notice. "You working again?" they'd ask. I'd nod, tired but proud, and little by little, some of them started to follow my steps. We shared job slips, split shifts, traded tips. We became more than just survivors. We became women trying to rise, even if it was just an inch at a time. And me, I started saving. Just a dollar here, two there, folded neat, hidden deep in my bag. My little treasure, proof that I wasn't finished yet. One day, Miss Darlene found me outside the church. waiting with blistered hands. Baby, she said, looking me up and down, you working too hard. I laughed, a tired laugh, but real. Working is what's keeping me alive. She nodded, slow, that feather on her hat bobbing. The Lord loves a woman who don't give up. Her words stayed with me because that's what I was doing, working with my hands, yes, but more than that, I was refusing to give up. And though I didn't know it then, those small jobs, those tired nights, they were the bricks, and brick by brick, I was building the foundation of something far greater. Her voice softens now, but carries a steady note of pride. Work didn't just give me money, it gave me back myself. And once I found myself again, nothing in this world could keep me down. You know, working through the day was one thing. When the sun was up, when my hands were busy, when sweat blinded my eyes, I could almost forget. Almost. But night, oh, night was cruel. Night strips you bare, takes away the noise, the distractions, the bustle of people, and it leaves you face to face with yourself, with your memories, with the echoes of everything you lost. And in those nights, I cried at the shelter after the lights went out. You could hear it. The soft sobbing of women muffled into pillows, the restless turning of girls who couldn't close their eyes because of the nightmares waiting on the other side. The whispers of prayer said in the dark, and sometimes the sound was mine. I would curl up on that thin cot, blanket scratchy against my skin, and I'd weep quiet as I could. But sometimes the tears came so hard my chest shook, not just for me, but for the little girl I had once been, for the young woman I once dreamed of being, for the mother I thought I had been, and most of all, for the daughter who told me to leave. You see, it wasn't just the cold or the hunger or the tiredness that hurt the most. It was the questions. Where did I go wrong? What mistake did I make that my own child no longer wanted me? Did I smother her? Did I fail her? Did I not love her right? The questions ran circles in my mind until I thought I'd lose myself in them. Sometimes I even thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was a burden. Maybe the best thing I could do for her was to disappear. Those thoughts, they scared me. I'd clutch my bag to my chest like it could anchor me to this world, and I'd whisper to myself, don't give up. Don't you dare give up. And I'd cry till the tears dried, till my body surrendered to sleep. But some nights I couldn't sleep at all. I'd sit by the window at the shelter, staring out at the street lights, watching shadows move, wondering if my daughter was awake too, pacing the floors like she used to when she had a sick child. I wondered if she ever missed me, if she ever felt that ache, the one that twists inside your chest when love is gone but not dead. I wanted to believe she did, that somewhere she thought of me, but the silence between us was louder than any thunderstorm. There was one night I remember clear as day. Rain was falling heavy, drumming on the roof of the shelter. I sat upright on my cot, unable to close my eyes, and I started talking, not to anyone, just to the dark. God, I whispered, are you still there? Because I don't feel you anymore. I feel alone. I feel like trash left on the curb. I gave everything I had to that girl, everything, and now I'm here. Why? Tell me why. And then the tears came again, hot, endless, drowning me from the inside. A woman in the next cot reached out, laid her hand on mine. She didn't say a word, didn't need to. Her touch said, I know, I cried too. Sometimes that's all we need. Not answers, not solutions. Just to know we're not the only ones broken. But here's the thing about nights of tears: they hurt, they burn, they make you feel like you'll never rise again. But every morning, the sun still came, and every morning I rose with it. Eyes swollen, throat raw, body heavy with grief. But I rose because somewhere deep down, even in the darkest night, a voice whispered, "Don't quit. Don't let this be your end." And I held on to that voice, some nights by a thread, but a thread was enough. You can only cry so many nights before something changes. Either the tears drown you or they wash you clean. For me, it was both. I had spent enough nights curled up, trembling, asking, why me? At some point, I realized life wasn't going to answer. No one was going to come and lift me off that cot, hand me back my home, give me back my daughter's love. If I wanted to rise, I would have to do it myself. It started small. One morning at the shelter, I stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror. My hair was wild gray strands pointing every which way. My eyes were red from crying. For a moment, I didn't even recognize the woman staring back at me. And something in me said, "That's not who you are." So I splashed cold water on my face. I pulled my hair back with an old elastic band, straightened my shoulders, looked myself dead in the eye, and whispered, "You're still here. That means you're still fighting." It wasn't much, but it was a start. I began walking differently too. Instead of shuffling head down, I forced myself to lift my chin. I told myself, even if you've only got $2 in your pocket, walk like you own the ground beneath your feet. And people notice that. The world treats you how you treat yourself. The same shop owners who used to ignore me started nodding hello. A clerk at the store offered me leftover bread at the end of the day, not out of pity, but respect. Even at the little jobs, folks began to say, "That lady works hard. That lady don't quit." And inside, my pride began to grow again. Not the pride that keeps you from asking for help. No, the kind of pride that says, "I may be down, but I am not done." One afternoon, Miss Darlene pulled me aside after church. "You look different, baby," she said. I laughed. "Different how?" Like a woman who's starting to remember her own strength. Her words lit something in me because she was right. I was remembering how I once carried my daughter on my hip while working double shifts, how I once held my husband's hand through sickness, how I once faced life with fire instead of fear. That woman wasn't gone. She had just been buried under grief, and now she was clawing her way back. Of course, strength don't come easy. There were still days I wanted to collapse, times my knees buckled from exhaustion, nights when the memories of my daughter's face telling me to leave came back sharp as knives. But instead of letting those moments break me, I began to use them. When the job was too heavy, I told myself, "Lift it. Show them you're more than they think." When the pay was too small, I told myself, "Save it anyway. Every dollar is a brick in your new life." When the world tried to make me feel invisible, I whispered inside, "I see me, and that's enough." And slowly, I was standing taller. There was a day, I'll never forget it, when I caught my reflection in a store window. I saw myself carrying 2 bags of groceries I had bought with my own money. My back was straight, my steps firm. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see a broken woman. I saw a fighter. And right there in the middle of the street, I smiled. Just a small smile, but real, because I knew I was no longer just surviving. I was learning to live again. Her voice softens now, but carries a quiet power, like she's speaking not just of herself, but to the listener too. The world can take your home. It can take your comfort. Sometimes it even takes the people you love. But as long as you have breath in your body, you can still stand. And once you stand, truly stand, there ain't nothing that can keep you down. They say when one door closes, another opens. But I'll be honest with you, when my daughter closed her door on me, it felt like every other door in the world slammed shut too. Until one day, a door finally opened. It was a Tuesday morning, hot, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin before the sun is even all the way up. I was on my way back from cleaning the diner. My back ached. My shoes had holes in them, and my hands smelled like grease and soap. That's when I saw a little shop I'd never really noticed before. A corner store with a faded sign, Millie's Flowers now. I don't know what pulled me to stop. Maybe it was the buckets of bright sunflowers lined up outside, shining like little suns against the gray street, or maybe it was just the smell, fresh, sweet, alive. Either way, I stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, and out came a woman with round glasses and silver hair piled high on her head. She looked at me with eyes sharp as needles, but kind too. "You here for work?" she asked just like that. I blinked. "Work? No, I was just because if you're just here to smell the roses, you're blocking my doorway," she cut in, waving me inside. Something in her voice made me laugh. And Lord, I hadn't laughed in weeks. I said, "Well, I am looking for work, always." She studied me up and down, my worn shoes, my tired face, my hands still raw from scrubbing. She said, "You look like a woman who knows how to work hard. Can you lift?" "Yes." "Can you sweep?" "Yes." "Can you listen and not argue?" I chuckled. "Most days." She smiled then. "All right, you can start tomorrow. The pay's small, but it's honest. Name's Millie." And just like that, the first door opened. I started sweeping floors, carrying buckets, trimming stems. At first, it was just a job like any other. But something about that shop, it gave me peace. Flowers don't care where you come from. They don't care if your heart is heavy or your pockets are empty. If you water them, if you give them care, they bloom. And in that little store, surrounded by colors and fragrance, I began to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could bloom again too. Miss Millie was tough, but she believed in me. "Don't slouch," she'd scold when I carried boxes. "Speak clear," she'd say when customers came in. "Look them in the eye, girl. Don't you dare act like you don't belong here." At first, I thought she was just being hard on me, but later I realized she was teaching me, training me, not just how to arrange roses or tie ribbons, but how to stand tall in the world again. One Saturday, a young bride came into the shop, nervous, hands shaking as she chose her bouquet. Millie was in the back, so it was just me at the counter. The girl looked up at me with wide, worried eyes and whispered, "I don't know if I picked the right flowers." I don't know what came over me, but I smiled, touched her hand gently, and said, "Honey, these flowers are perfect, and you know why. Because they're yours. When you hold them, you'll shine. And when you shine, nobody will be looking at the flowers. They'll be looking at you." The bride's eyes filled with tears, the good kind, and she hugged me. When Millie came out and saw, she raised her brows at me. Later she said, "You've got something, you know that. A way of making people feel seen. That's rarer than any flower in this shop." And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt useful, not just as a cleaner, not just as a worker, but as a person who could touch lives. That night, lying on my cot, I whispered to myself, maybe this is it. Maybe this is where things begin to change. Because sometimes all it takes is one open door and the courage to walk through it. And let me tell you, I walked through that door with everything I had. It's a strange thing, child, when you've been in the dark for so long. Even the smallest light feels like a sunrise. That flower shop, it was my sunrise. At first, I was just sweeping, carrying buckets, trimming stems. But slowly, Millie started teaching me more. Not like that, she'd say, grabbing my clumsy hands as I tied a ribbon. Gentle but firm. Flowers are like people. They don't like to be strangled, but they still need guidance. Or she'd make me redo an arrangement 3, 4 times until it was just right. Balance, she'd mutter, pointing at the bouquet. Life is all about balance. Don't put all the roses on one side, girl. Spread the beauty around. I used to think she was just talking about flowers, but now I know she was talking about me. The shop became my world. Every morning I'd step inside and breathe deep. The smell of lilies, roses, carnations wrapping around me like a blanket. And something inside me started to shift. I was no longer just a woman who had been thrown out, no longer just a mother aching for her child. I was needed. Customers came in and they looked to me for help. Brides, widows, young boys buying flowers for their sweethearts. All of them trusted my hands, my words, my touch. And every time I placed a bouquet in someone's arms, I felt like I was giving them more than flowers. I was giving them a piece of hope. One day, a man walked in, rough looking, calloused hands, clothes covered in paint. He stood there shifting, nervous, until I asked, "What can I help you with?" He scratched his head. "It's my wife's birthday. I've never bought flowers before." I smiled. "Tell me something about her." He blinked. She she laughs a lot, loud, like music. Without thinking, I reached for yellow daisies and bright tulips, tying them with a ribbon the color of sunshine. When I handed them to him, he stared. "That's her," he whispered. "That's exactly her." And child, I swear, in that moment, I felt like I'd found a piece of my old self again. The woman who knew how to read people's hearts. Millie noticed it too. "You've got to give," she told me one evening as we closed the shop, "not just with flowers, with people. You see them, and Lord knows this world needs more of that." Her words stayed with me, carved deep inside my chest, like a promise I didn't even know I'd been waiting for. But with the bloom of hope also came fear, because part of me whispered, what if it's all taken away again? What if I lose this too? At night, those fears crept in, wrapping tight around my throat. But every morning when I stepped into that shop and smelled those flowers, I told myself, no, this is mine. I've earned this. And little by little, I began to believe it. There came a morning I'll never forget. I was arranging a window display, sunflowers, roses, lilies, all bursting with color, when a group of children walked by. They pressed their faces against the glass, giggling, pointing, and I caught my reflection there too, in that window full of blooms. I didn't see a broken woman anymore. I didn't see a castaway mother. I saw a woman surrounded by life, by beauty, a woman with purpose. And for the first time in years, I felt proud of myself, truly proud. Her voice softens, carrying a warmth that feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. Hope, child, it don't come all at once. It sneaks in, like a flower pushing through a crack in the pavement. Small at first, fragile, but if you tend it, If you water it with faith and hard work, it grows. And standing in that little flower shop with dirt under my nails and color all around me, I knew my hope was blooming. Every journey has a turning point, a moment when you realize this is it. This is where things change. For me, that moment came with flowers. It was a Friday morning when Millie came rushing into the shop, her glasses sliding down her nose, her cheeks flushed red. Lord help us, she muttered, waving a sheet of paper at me. I looked up from trimming roses. What's wrong? She slapped the paper down. We've got a wedding order. Big. I'm talking centerpieces, bouquets, altar flowers, the whole shebang. And it's in 2 days. My eyes widened. 2 days? That's not possible. Millie's lips pressed tight. It's possible if we don't sleep. I laughed, but inside my stomach twisted. I'd only ever helped with small orders, bouquets for birthdays, a few wreaths for funerals. But this was different. Still, I nodded. All right then, let's do it. Those next 2 days were a blur of color, petals, and sleepless hours. Buckets lined the back room, overflowing with roses, lilies, carnations. My hands worked until they cramped, my fingers raw from thorns. Millie was everywhere at once, barking instructions, fixing mistakes, keeping us from falling apart. But there were moments she let me take the lead. Make the bride's bouquet, she said on the second night, sliding the flowers toward me. I froze. Me! But, no buts, she cut in. You've got the touch. I've seen it. Now show me. My hands trembled as I began. White roses for purity, soft pink lilies for love, a touch of baby's breath, delicate, like a whisper of hope. When I tied the ribbon and lifted it up, Millie's eyes softened. That, she said, is a bride's bouquet. And for the first time in forever, I believed her. The wedding day came. We loaded everything into the van, every stem trembling as much as my hands. When we arrived at the church, the place was bare, echoing, cold. But as we worked, setting vases, laying garlands, arranging the altar, the space transformed. By the time the bride walked in to see it, the whole church looked alive, bright, sacred. She covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. It's perfect, she whispered. It's more than I ever dreamed. And when I handed her the bouquet I'd made, she hugged me tight like I was family. Child, I can't tell you what that did to me. After everything I'd lost, after all the nights of tears, to feel someone hold me with gratitude instead of rejection, it lit something inside me I thought was gone forever. Later that night, back at the shop, Millie sat me down. You did good, she said simply. I shook my head. We did good. She leaned closer, her eyes sharp but kind. No, girl, you don't shrink yourself. You've got talent, and if you nurture it, it'll take you farther than you think. Her words hit me deep, because for so long I had been nothing but small, a shadow, a burden. But standing there, still smelling of roses and lilies, I felt bigger, like maybe I had a future again. That wedding was just the beginning. Word spread fast. Soon brides were asking for me by name. Customers wanted my touch on their arrangements. And every time someone said, she's the one who made my flowers, I felt my heart stretch wider, stronger. Because success, it doesn't always come with riches or applause or big houses. Sometimes it comes with the simple joy of knowing you are good at something. And Lord, that feeling was worth more than gold. Her voice softens at the end, carrying both pride and tenderness, like she's passing a secret on to the listener. So remember this, child. Sometimes all it takes is one chance, one person who believes in you, one moment to prove yourself. And when that moment comes, grab it with both hands because it just might be the first success that changes everything. You know, child, success is a funny thing. At first, it feels like a miracle, like lightning striking once in a lifetime. But then if you're brave enough to hold on to it, it starts to feel like soil beneath your feet, soil where dreams can grow. That's what happened to me after that wedding. Word spread fast. Brides came asking for me. Families requested my hands for their funerals, their birthdays, their celebrations. And every time I stood in that shop arranging blooms with care, I felt something stirring inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. One evening after we closed the shop, I stayed behind to sweep the floor. The air smelled of roses and eucalyptus, soft music still playing on the old radio in the corner. As I moved the broom, I caught myself whispering, what if? What if I could do more than this? What if I could have a shop of my own one day? What if I could build something so strong, so beautiful, that no one could ever take it from me? The thought scared me. It felt too big, too bold, too impossible for a woman like me. A woman who had once been thrown out like she was nothing. But still, the dream took root that night, small, fragile, but alive. Millie must have seen it in me because one day she said, you're not just a worker anymore. You're becoming an artist. I laughed. An artist? Me? She nodded firm. Don't laugh it off. Flowers are your paint. Bouquets are your canvas. And people feel what you create. That's art. Her words planted something deeper in me. If she could see it, maybe I could see it too. I started saving. Every tip I earned, every extra dollar from side jobs. Instead of buying little comforts, I tucked the money away in an envelope under my cot. It wasn't much, but each bill I added felt like a seed. Seeds I was planting for a future I couldn't fully see yet, but desperately wanted. One Sunday after church, I walked by a little empty storefront. The windows were dusty, the sign above the door faded and crooked. Most people would have seen nothing but an old forgotten space. But me, I stood there staring, heart beating fast, and for the first time, I saw something different. I saw shelves filled with vases, buckets of bright flowers lined up by the door, a little bell jingling when customers walked in. And behind the counter, I saw myself, not the broken, cast out mother, but a woman standing tall, a woman who had built something with her own hands. I whispered under my breath, one day, one day, this could be mine. And from then on, I carried that dream with me everywhere I went. Now, child, don't get me wrong. Dreams don't bloom overnight. They take watering. They take patience. They take grit. But once a dream takes root in your heart, it changes how you live. Every bouquet I tied, every order I filled, every dollar I saved, I wasn't just working anymore. I was building towards something bigger. And though I didn't know it yet, those roots would one day grow into a garden far larger than I ever imagined. Her voice softens at the close, warm and almost like a lullaby, but carrying quiet determination beneath the tenderness. So remember this, my dear. Don't be afraid of what if. Don't be afraid of dreams that scare you, because sometimes the very dream that frightens you the most is the one that will save your life. Child, I wish I could tell you that once my dreams took root, everything was smooth and easy. But life doesn't work that way. Dreams don't grow in sunshine alone. They need storms too. And Lord, did I face them. The first storm was money. No matter how much I saved, it never felt like enough. Every time I added a dollar to that envelope under my cot, something came to snatch it away. The shelter raised their fee. My shoes wore out, and I had to buy new ones just to keep standing on my feet all day. Sometimes food costs more than I planned. And each time I opened that envelope, I felt the weight of it, light, too light. And the fear whispered, "You'll never make it. You'll never get out of here." But still, I kept saving. $1, two, 10 when I could. Slow, steady, like drops filling a bucket, because I knew even slow rain fills the river. The second storm was doubt, not from others, from inside me. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the shelter, asking myself, who do you think you are? A shop, your own business. That's for younger folks, smarter folks, richer folks, not you. The voice of fear is sneaky. It sounds like truth. But every morning when I stepped into Millie's shop and breathed in those flowers, I told myself, maybe I can't have it all yet, but I can keep moving. I can keep building. And that thought carried me. The third storm came unexpected. One day, a customer came in, angry, red-faced. She claimed the bouquet I'd made for her mother's birthday had wilted too soon. I tried to explain. Flowers have their seasons, their lives. But she didn't want to hear it. She shouted, "You don't know what you're doing. I want my money back." Her words cut deep. It felt like every insult, every rejection I'd faced came rushing back in her voice. I stood there trembling until Millie stepped in. She refunded the money, calmed the woman down. Then, after the customer left, Millie turned to me. "Listen," she said, firm but gentle. "Not everyone will love your work. Not everyone will treat you kind. But don't you dare let one voice drown out all the others. You hear me?" I nodded. And in that moment, I learned something important. Storms don't just test your skill, they test your spirit. The hardest storm, though, came from within the shop itself. A younger girl started working part-time, quick with her hands, full of charm with the customers. Folks began asking for her instead of me. I'd smile on the outside, but inside, jealousy twisted me like thorns. I thought, maybe I'm being replaced again. Maybe I'll lose this too. One night I broke down in the back room, hands shaking as I scrubbed the buckets. Millie found me there and said, "Child, listen. Flowers don't compete with each other. A rose doesn't try to outshine a daisy. They just bloom, each in their own time, their own beauty. You, you are no less because someone else shines too." Her words, they sank deep, and I realized jealousy is another kind of storm, one that can uproot you if you let it. So I chose to bloom anyway. Her voice steadies here, strong and calm, like a woman who survived the storms and came out tougher. Storms came for my money. Storms came for my confidence. Storms came for my heart. But here's the truth. Storms don't come to destroy you. They come to test your roots. And my roots, they held. Child, if you ever find yourself in the middle of a storm, don't curse it. Don't ask, why me? Ask instead, what is this storm teaching me? What strength is it watering in me? Because sometimes the darkest storm clouds carry the rain that makes your garden grow. And though I didn't know it yet, my garden was about to bloom bigger than I ever dreamed. Dreams are easy to think about, child, easy to whisper to yourself when no one's listening. But turning those dreams into action, that that takes courage. And Lord knows I didn't have much courage left. But there came a day when I had to take that first step. I'd been working at Millie's shop for months, saving every spare dollar. That little envelope under my cot was growing thicker, though still too thin to feel safe in my hands. Every night I'd pull it out, count the bills, then tuck it back away, whispering, one day. But one evening, Millie caught me staring too long at that empty storefront down the street, the one I'd begun to dream about. She walked up beside me, squinted at it, and said, "You keep looking at that place like it's calling your name." My cheeks burned. I I was just thinking. Thinking about what? She asked. I hesitated, then whispered, what if it was mine? What if I had a shop of my own one day? She didn't laugh, didn't scoff. She just nodded slow. Well, she said, every big tree starts with a seed. Maybe it's time you planted yours. That night I couldn't sleep. Her words kept rolling around in my head. A seed, I realized. I'd been watering my dream in secret, but I hadn't planted it yet. And what's the use of seeds locked away in an envelope? So the next morning, I did something bold. I marched myself down to the bank. Now, child, you have to understand that bank was no place I ever thought I belonged. The marble floors, the men in pressed suits, the women clicking their heels across the tiles. I felt like a ragged sparrow lost among peacocks, but I took a deep breath, clutched my envelope tight, and walked up to the counter. I want to open an account, I said, my voice trembling but firm. The clerk raised her brows at the crumpled bills I handed over, but she smiled anyway. Of course, ma'am, right this way. And just like that, my seed was planted. It wasn't much, just a small account, barely a sprout, but to me, it meant everything. Because now my dream wasn't just in my head. It wasn't just whispered in the dark. It was written down, official, real. Each dollar I added after that felt like watering my seed. Each sacrifice, skipping a warm meal, patching old shoes instead of buying new ones, felt like sunlight, like rain. And with every deposit, I whispered, grow, grow, grow. One evening, Millie asked me to stay late. We sat together among the flowers, the shop quiet except for the hum of the cooler. You took the first step, didn't you? She asked, eyes twinkling behind her glasses. I froze. How did you know? She chuckled. Because you walk different now, like a woman who's not just working for me, but building something for herself. Tears burned my eyes. I'm scared, Millie. What if I fail? She reached across the counter, took my hands in hers. Then you get back up. Failure's not the end, child. It's just part of the planting. Every garden has weeds, has storms. But if the root is strong, the flower still comes. Her words settled deep in my chest, and I knew then. I had started something that couldn't be undone. Her voice steadies, a quiet pride rising underneath the tenderness. That was the day my dream stopped being a dream. It became a seed, planted, real, growing in the soil of my faith and hard work. And though it would be years before I saw it bloom fully, that seed of independence was the beginning of everything. Child, once you plant a seed, you can't just sit back and wait. You've got to tend it, water it, work with your hands until the sweat runs down your brow. And that's what I did. Every morning, I worked in Millie's shop. Every evening, when my shift was done, I stayed behind to learn. I studied how she arranged the flowers, how she balanced colors, soft pinks against deep greens, bright yellows against whites. I watched the way she tied ribbons, the way her fingers moved fast but gentle, never breaking a stem. She showed me how to order stock, how to check which deliveries were fresh, and which ones had already seen better days. She even let me peek at her ledgers, numbers scrawled in neat lines, showing what came in, what went out, what was profit, what was loss. Child, I'd never been good with numbers, but I forced myself to learn pencil in hand, copying her records until the figures stopped swimming on the page. Because if I wanted my own shop one day, I couldn't just know how to make bouquets. I had to know how to keep the doors open. The sacrifices grew heavier. While other women bought new dresses, I wore the same old one, patching the seams when they split. While they sat in diners with steaming plates, I warmed my hands around a paper cup of broth. Every penny I saved felt like a stone in the foundation of my dream, and the heavier it grew, the stronger I stood beneath it. But there were nights, child. Oh, there were nights. Nights when my stomach growled louder than my hope. Nights when I passed a bakery and the smell of bread made my eyes water with longing. Nights when I asked myself if it was worth it, all this hunger, all this sacrifice, for a dream that still lived only in my head. And each time I answered myself, yes, because this time I'm building something no one can take away. Then came the day Millie placed a heavy box in front of me. What's this? I asked. She smiled. Tools of the trade, old scissors, extra vases, leftover ribbon. They're not new, but they'll get you started. I stared at her, my throat tight. Millie, why? Because, she said softly, a bird can't fly without wings. And I think it's time you start collecting yours. Child. I carried that box back to the shelter like it was treasure. Because to me, it was. I started practicing at night. In the corner of the shelter with old jars for vases and borrowed scissors, I made arrangements by lamplight. Flowers I bought cheap at the market, wilted, unwanted by anyone else. I gave them new life with my hands. The other women would gather round, watching as I worked. Sometimes they'd laugh, clap, even ask me to make a bouquet for them, just to brighten their side of the room. And for the first time in a long time, I felt useful, not just surviving, not just scraping by, but creating, building. Those nights I forgot my hunger. I forgot my worn shoes and aching bones. All I knew was the flowers, the colors, the shapes in my hands. I was no longer a woman who had been thrown out. I was a woman shaping something new. Child, sometimes we think strength comes from big victories, but no, strength grows in the little things. Every penny saved, every vase filled, every ribbon tied. These small hands are mine. They built something piece by piece. And though it was still only a dream, I could feel it taking form, like clay under a sculptor's palms. And so I kept working, hands tired, stomach empty, heart sometimes heavy, but always moving, always building, because I knew one day these hands would open the door to a shop of my own. And when that day came, no storm, no hunger, no rejection in this world would take it away from me. If you want to listen to the next part, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications.